Warmest welcome to all this important event, and let me briefly introduce our foundation and our distinguished guests. First of all, let me say that our foundation, it is the only Italian foundation and charity, according to Italian law, devoted to the paradigm of salutogenesis. Our previous charity, the Association for Person-Centered Medicine, organized together with the International Institute Shengshung for Tibetan Studies, the incredible keynote lecture, Lectio Magistralis, at the University of Bologna in 2010. We had received the endorsement from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, from the Italian Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, etc., etc. It has been an unbelievable event, thanks to the compassion of our precious master, Chujana Kenor Rinpoche. Thanks to inheritance of a patient of mine, we had the chance to transform our charity in a foundation, acquiring the premises, and to raise the legal status of our charity to that of a foundation. What is salutogenesis is a term coined by the Israeli sociologist Aaron Antonovsky. It comes from the Latin and Greek roots, salutogenesis, everything which can create and promote health. Hence, salutogenesis, which is a common concept to all the traditional medicine systems, according to World Health Organization, is for us the best referring model for health promotion. Also because it is based on the Ottawa Charter issued by the World Health Organization. We work in the field of voluntary, citizens' rights, organize events. We have been accredited by the Italian government as a body for under and postgraduate education, and also we have clinical activities. We are a member of the most important, let me say, network for health promotion and education worldwide, and in Italy, we are a member of the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development. These are the pictures of the members of our board of directors. These are our colleagues from anthroposophic medicine to acupuncture, Rolfing, Ayurveda, dance movement therapy, surgery, orthopedics, and sociotherapist, pedagogist, etc. These are some photos of our premises, and you can see this is the office for the meeting of the board, or for video conferences, or for small classes. The offices take names of the colors. So this is red offices, the blue one and the green one. This is the main hall where we can both use for on-site events and courses and for bodily activities as well. Now we are to our distinguished guest, Alejandro Chaoul and Fabio Andrico. Alejandro Chaoul studied in the Tibetan traditions since 1989, including with Chogyal Nankai Norbu Rinpoche, and for nearly 30 years in the Pön tradition with Yazid Tenzin Lopon Nandag Rinpoche and His Holiness Lungtok Tempai Nima Rinpoche and Geshe Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. He got his PhD in Tibetan religions from Rice University and he is the director of the Mind, Body, Spirit Institute at the Jung Center of Houston, Texas, US. He is a senior teacher for Lemincha International, which is the network founded by Geshe Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, and for the Three Doors, Transforming Lives Through Meditation. And for the last 20 years, particularly at the University of Texas and the Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, he has been teaching and researching the benefits of Tibetan mind-body practices in oncology. Dr. Chaoul has 35 research articles indexed under Scopus database for peer-reviewed literature and 21 articles indexed under PubMed, the scientific database of the United States National Library of Medicine at the National Institute of Health. His research, and we can see in a few minutes, covers several topics from Tibetan yoga to mindfulness, from social science to biochemistry, genetics, and molecular biology. Alejandro is also a contemplative fellow at the Mind Life Institute, and he is the author of Chot Practice in the Bön Tradition, Tibetan Yoga for Health and Well-Being, and the recently published Tibetan Yoga, Magical Movements of Body, Breath, and Mind, recently presented at Tibetan House upon invitation of Professor Robert Thurman. And the online courses, Meditation, Breath, and Movement, External, Internal, and Secret Salung for Lemincha Learning and Tibetan Yoga for the Wisdom Academy. We can see now the screen of Alejandro Scopus database. Each researcher, let me say for those not accustomed in research fields, each researcher has its own area, resuming and describing both the affiliation, the subject areas, the impact factors, how many articles has been indexed, etc. Let me call upon your attention that the 35 articles by Alejandro Chaoul indexed in Scopus have been cited 575 times in other articles of other authors. And his Hirsch index or H index is 12. This slide describes the areas involved in Alejandro research. You can see from yoga, dhyana, meditation, to mindfulness, to caregiving auspices, palliative care, integrative oncology, faith-based, symptom assessment, and mixed method research. So is eclectic researcher, our colleague Alejandro Chaoul. So it's quite interesting to let you know the area, because the very first time when I know him, not in person, but was when I was working for the European Union in the Cambrella Consortium, And one of the US researcher mentioned and quoted was Alejandro. These are the cover of the books mentioned, published by Alejandro Chaoul. And now let me introduce Fabio Andrico, BSc, is the Director of Movement and Mind Department in Hatha Yoga Foundation, the chairman of its scientific committee, and is the founder of Respira Method. Fabio has been teaching yoga internationally for over 40 years, and he has been learning, practicing, teaching, and writing about Yantra Yoga since the late 1970s, when he studied Shivananda Yoga during a trip to India. In the following years, Fabio was exposed to many yoga traditions, and he ultimately met his root teacher, Dzogchen Master Chujana Ankai Norbu Rinpoche. And he had the rare opportunity and privilege to learn the Tibetan tradition of Yantra Yoga directly from this lineage holder. Fabio got his graduation in the Oriental Studies at the University of Naples, L'Orientale, under and with Professor Nankei Norbu. At the time, Professor Norbu had the chair of Tibetan and Mongolian languages and literature upon invitation of Professor Giuseppe Tucci. Fabio is both a Hatha Yoga and Yantra Yoga instructor, as well as the senior authorized trainer of Yantra Yoga teachers. He has been teaching courses, workshops, and teacher trainings in many countries around the world, including China, Japan, Europe, Russia, South and North America, in many different centers of Dzogchen community and other well-known venues, including, for example, Kripalu, Esalen, Yoga 3 in the US, and in Yoga Federation in Russia, through groups of up to 700 participants. Drawing on decades of experience, he developed the before mentioned Respira Method, a comprehensive method of breath walking for learning how to breathe smoothly and consciously for health and well-being. Fabio compiles this method in the book Breath as You Are. He teaches it internationally with the support of a growing team of accredited instructors, the Respira team. Andrico has appeared in videos such as Breath, the Perfect Harmony of Breathing, the 8 Movements of Yantra Yoga, the Tibetan Yoga Movement, Level 1 and Level 2, Kumbhaka Training Course, and he collaborated on the book Yantra Yoga, the Tibetan Yoga Movement, and also co-authored with Chujana Norbu Rinpoche the book Tibetan Yoga Movement, the Art and Practice of Yantra Yoga. And let's have a look of the covers of this publication. These are the books on Yantra Yoga, and these are the publication on the Respira Method. The Foundation for Salutogenesis, our charity, has been accredited by Fabio as the Italian Respira Method Authorized Center. So Fabio will have his next course on next June, and for instructors on next September. And here are the advertising, and so do not hesitate to contact us for any your further inquiries, and follow us in our social channel.
I really, as Paolo was saying, I went into through family members having cancer, and actually, just as Namkha Norbu Rinpoche was diagnosed with cancer. My father was diagnosed at the same year. And I was here in Houston, where there's one of the largest cancer centers, MD Anderson. And I connected there. I started volunteering with the support of both Namkha Norbu Rinpoche and Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. And that's how I started as a volunteer. And then, as Paolo mentioned, met Lorenzo Cohen, who was a researcher, who's still a researcher at MD Anderson and director of the Integrative Medicine Program. And we got a team together with Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche and Lorenzo and myself and started doing research. And I wanted to share some of that with you today briefly, so you can have some idea. And then when Fabio talks, and then we hopefully will have time for discussion. So I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm hoping that you can see it. And let me get it into the right mode. And so, as some of you know, the way that we talk about Tibetan yoga, yantra yoga, and I'm going to let Fabio talk of how Namkha Norbu Rinpoche translated yantra yoga. But really, in the Tibetan text that I work with, we call it Salung Trungkor. And Sa means channels or nadi, when for those who are doing Indian-based yoga. Lung can be retranslated as prana, or vital breath or winds. And Trulkor is this compound that it's also, Trulpa is more like magic, Kor is like movement, so kind of magical movements. So sometimes I would translate Tibetan yoga as these magical movements that use the breath and the channels. And as you can see in this image, which comes from the Lulakang in Tibet behind the Potala, it's about movements. So these are not static postures, asanas, but actually movements. And I'm both in actually Yantra Yoga, which is actually a Trungkor from the Nida Kajor Trungkor text, the union of sun and moon, that Fabio will talk more, and both of the texts that I will talk about, which come from the Atu Trungkor, or the instructions of the and the Shengshung Ninju, the oral transmission of Shengshung. Now, I think what's really important about yoga, Namkha Norbu Rinpoche was so emphatic about this, that yoga is not just about moving. One of my teachers, Lopon Tilanima, would say, if we just move, it's fun, but it doesn't really get into the deep meaning of yoga. And Namkha Norbu Rinpoche, in his book, The 8 Movements of Yantra Yoga, talks about how the real meaning of yoga is to discover our real condition. I remember being with our common teacher, Namkha Norbu Rinpoche, and him saying that this is a path to enlightenment. And so I think this is really important to understand as we enter into this world of, let's say, Tibetan yoga as a whole. And that really, at the end of the day, is to discover that is always been there, our state of mind. And that's why I carry this shirt as well. You know, that state of mind that represents that rikpa, that awareness, but that is supported by the 5 elements. And so even when we talk about our body, we talk that the elements compose our body, right? The earth composes our flesh and bones. The blood is composed by water element. The fire is our heat. The wind is our breath. And the space is consciousness. So, and notice that I'm pointing here, not here. So when we talk about mind, kind of the big mind, it's at the heart mind. I call the brain almost like our business address of the mind, and the heart our home address of the mind. So when we rest, we want to be here. This word in Tibetan, when we say Neljor, or this, which is the translation of yoga, is this resting in this practice. And again, when we see these when we talk about the channels, again, for example, this again is from an image of the Lulakang in Tibet. You can see that, it's about being in that center of our being. And the channels, the Tsa and the Lung and the True Core, are ways, are method to get us to rediscover that real condition that Namkha Norbu Rinpoche talks about. Now, when we go to Western science, we can go back to the 70s when George Engel wrote this really crucial piece on the need of a new medical model. In a way, the challenge of biomedicine, meaning that it's not just about the physical aspect of health, but really the social and psycho-spiritual, and that health is at that intersection. I guess COVID, if not before, COVID really makes us understand how social health and psycho-spiritual health are really important, and not just physical health. On the other hand, Arthur Kleinman, as a medical sociologist, anthropologist, talking about the illness narrative. So it's not about just the disease. So I worked for 20 years at a cancer hospital. It's not just about the cancer. It's about, what's the illness experience, what the illness narrative. This person that happens to have cancer, it's also a whole human being. And he or she comes with a whole history and comes, as we go into that encounter with him or her, this person, may be coming from another country, may not be speaking the same language, may not have insurance, may not have family members with them. All this is part of that illness narrative, that illness experience. And that's really, when we focus on this broader way of seeing health, this is where these practices make more sense. Now, with the National Institutes of Health, they have a center specifically for what used to be called NCAM, the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, that now it's called NCI, the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. And mind-body practices have a place there. So, and the place it's that the way that they define them is the variety of techniques designed to enhance the mind's capacity to affect bodily functions and symptoms. So that through these practices that we bring from the mind, we can really affect bodily functions and symptoms. And so it's important to understand this word affect, because we can affect it positively or negatively, right? And so when we talk about stress, is all this, at least chronic stress, all this negative effect on our bodily functions and symptoms. When we do these practices, do they have the capacity to reverse that and to connect us in a different way? On one hand, we would say for the temporary goal of health, and for many of us who are Dharma practitioners, also with the long goal of enlightenment, whether it's in this lifetime or sometime in the future. And so as we see that, besides, of course, Namkha Norbu Rinpoche, these are the teachers in the Bön tradition, and Paolo already mentioned them, but on your right, you have Hisones Lungto Tempanima, who passed away a few years ago. And on your left, you have Lopon Tenzin Namdak, who's now 97 years old. He's in Nepal. 2 years ago, right before COVID, I was able to go back to see him. He was turning 95. It was a wonderful celebration. And next to him is Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. Again, many of you may know him, and both a student of Yongdzor Rinpoche as well as a teacher in his own means. And of course, he's been connected very strongly with Namkha Norbu Rinpoche, and for me, that was the nexus as well. And so with that, as I was saying, when in 1998, when both Namkha Norbu Rinpoche as well as my father were diagnosed of different cancers, I was able to start as a volunteer at MD Anderson. And actually, I started leading practices. They gave me 6 months, and I stayed 20 years. And not only leading practices, but then starting doing research, particularly We started with people with lymphoma, both Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's. Then we moved to women with breast cancer, and then with people with lung cancer and their caregivers. So I'm just going to mention briefly today about these studies. But really what I wanted to also mention is that for me, since I was coming as a practitioner, my PhD, as Paolo said, is in religious studies. So I'm not an MD. And so when I was I wanted to make sure that our practices were part of it, that when we talk about these yogas, it was not just about asana. It was not just about the postural yoga that permeates a lot of the practices here. I'm not saying those are wrong. I'm just saying where I wanted to focus. I wanted to focus on the power of breath, on the power of the 5 kinds of breath as they are explained both in Tibetan medicine and Indian medicine, but particularly in the text that I was working with in Tibetan yoga. And so for me, this was important. And I was delighted to see that in our first study that I'll mention in a minute, we were able to put in the bibliography the text that we work with from the Mother Tantra, from the Dzogchen texts. And so this is really important. And that when we taught the patients and caregivers, that we would tell them about how these practices, how this breathing, even the holding of the breath, how did they relate to their health? And so, yes, we did talk about chakras and about channels, and I know different traditions have different renderings. So this is the way that we work with them. The channels are 3 channels and they don't cross. There's 5 chakras, not 7. Not that there's actually 72,000 chakras, but we work with these 5 chakras. It's not that we lost 2 chakras on the way. It's just that this is what the text works with, and that's how we work with. And that, but really, again, going back, honing back into what Namkha Rinpoche says, it's really about being in the real condition, being back into the central channel, but also realizing how being in the side channels and how the power of being through the chakras can relate us to come back to being in the central channel in that sense of more non-dual awareness. But also understanding how each of the elements support different qualities that can bring us in. If we think back into the and the 5 colors, how each of the elements support us to not just be grounded, but grounded in our meditation, be comfortable in our meditation, have joy and inspiration in our meditation, be able to be flexibility and include the movement, and being openness and accommodate the different realities that are happening. So sometimes what we do is we teach from the Tsalung, from the Mother Tantra that has external, internal, and secret Tsalungs. Sometimes, and this is the text from, I thought I had another picture of Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche's book on the Mother Tantra. If not, I'll have it in a moment. It's this one, Awakening the Body. And then this one is from my book relating to the Ati Trunkor, so the instructions of the where I also talk about some of the studies. And this one is from the Shengshung Ninju, the oral transmission of Shengshung. And as Paolo said, this is from my last book. Now, we created protocols where we included some of these practices. And what we wanted to do is to include them as a whole. Although we couldn't, of course, put the whole, practice, we took whole sets. And so, for example, we did the whole external Tsalung and the Ngondro movements of the Shengshung Ninju. We created a protocol with people with lymphoma. And this was the first study we did. This was in the 1999, 2000. We got it published in 2004 in Cancer Journal. And actually, interesting enough, I didn't realize until recently that Lorenzo told me, this was the first study of any kind of yoga in a cancer journal. And also it was the first one in Tibetan yoga with any population. And what we found is that people it was a randomized controlled trial, and those who were practicing the Tibetan yoga intervention we're able to have better sleep quality, better sleep quantity, better sleep latency, which is the moment you go to sleep and actually until you fall asleep, and actually less sleep medicine. You know, I was quite young then. I didn't think sleep was an issue. Now I know a little more, but at least for sure for people through cancer, it's a huge issue. And as I mentioned it, before, we were talking before we started, you know, my wife has been going through a whole year of treatment, and I can, see how important sleep is. Sorry. We moved into the area of research then with women with breast cancer. And we were able to get a large grant from the National Cancer Institute. And we focused specifically of where our results pointed, which was that women undergoing chemotherapy during their breast cancer treatment really had better support from the Tibetan yoga, better results. And so when we did that, not only we continued to have that, but we also had it was a randomized trial that we even had an active research component control, which was movement, just stretching. That was already part of some of the books and that the physical therapist used for the recuperation of women during breast cancer treatment. And so we compared them. And what we found is that Tibetan yoga had better results, and particularly what we found, which our clinicians were interested in, is the dose. And the dose was that they needed to at least practice over 2 times a week. So if they practiced 2 or less, they didn't get the same results as they practiced 3 or more. So that was an important result for them. The other part is that, as I mentioned with George Engel's work, the social component is important. And so this connection, not just about the patient meditating or doing the Tibetan yoga, but really the connection between patient and caregiver, for example, these diets. And so we joined forces with a social psychologist, and we created a program that it was a couple-based program, that it was patient and their caregiver. These were people with lung cancer. So we were a little concerned because, as I mentioned, and as you probably know already, most of this yoga, you're holding your breath. So can these patients do this? And what we said is, as we say in Tibetan, kale kale, go slowly, right? If you can't hold during the whole time, just a little bit and slowly expand. But most importantly is doing it together. And so when we taught these people, it was kind of, as we usually teach, seeing the instructor. But once we taught them, we said, now look at each other. And what we found, besides what you see here, the clinical levels, both of patients and caregivers, of fatigue, sleep, and depressive symptoms went down, is that their relationships strengthened. You know, we know the power of Sangha, right? Of practicing together. But sometimes in the medical world, they don't, we have to prove it. And so this practicing together, you could see, besides their clinical results, that they will extend a hand or extend a foot and touch each other. And they would say that their relationship improved by practicing together. So another support of that social support, where we know that there's a lot of literature behind it as well. So I just wanted to mention again, in the Tibetan Yoga for Health and Well-being, I focus more on the Atri Trunkor, particularly on the 16 movements from the 40 movements that we put together with Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche and 2 other geshes. And I learned them in Menri Monastery in India with His Holiness Lumto Tempanima, so I dedicate my book to him. And then the one with that I just published last year on the Shengshung Ninju Trunkor that I learned in Tritanawitse, Nepal, with Yongsen Rinpoche, and so I dedicated to him. And Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche is visiting now Nepal, and I sent my book to Lopun, and so he sent me this photo that it touches my heart, so I wanted to share of Lopun with the book. And then just mention that, you know, these practices are still practiced at, well, we're for sure before COVID. Now we have to see how we get them back, but into the hospital itself, into integrative medicine. We have them even as videos for people to be able to practice them, even if they're not inpatients or not patients at MD Anderson. And so we have videos available through our mdanderson.org/integrative med center. So with that, I wanted to finish. I wanted to thank everyone here. I wanted to thank Mathieu Ricard for letting me use this beautiful picture of saying thank you and namaste.
Thank you very much, Alejandro, for your wonderful presentation. And I am sure that a lot of questions will arise from the audience. And now the floor goes to Fabio, please.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Alejandro and join him in generating compassion for all in the situation we are living now, and in general, because if you really learn how to donate, then as His Holiness said, if you want to be a good egoist, is not his words, but the concept, then do the benefit of others, because if others will be happy, then you too can be happy. So if you want to be a smart egoist, work for the benefit and the happiness of others. And this moment is truly very important, even donating our merits and whatever we think we have accumulated of positive, to try to dispel this cloud from our condition. And I want to simply, I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm not very familiar with this kind of interaction. I'm not very much used to it. And but I want to go back to the word yoga, because as Alejandro said, Naljor, generally we intend yoga as union. Mostly is intended like union, the Sanskrit root. But I remember, because I studied Hatha Yoga in India, in the tradition of Shivananda. I studied also Vedanta. And so Vedanta is considered a jnana yoga, yoga of knowledge, where is said that the real yogi doesn't have to unify anything, because if there is something to unify, it's dualistic. So when you are beyond, you are really in yoga. So even in that point of view, there is not really the principle of unifying. It's more like having that capacity of being in that condition, in that state. And this is the meaning I understand when we say Naljor. Nalma is considered our natural state from the beginning. And Jorwa, being able to be in that state, having the capacity of being in that state. So there is nothing to unify in reality. Ma is going beyond this aspect, this concept, this condition. Now, when we talk about Yantra Yoga of Vairochana, this is the tradition that Rinpoche was transmitting and teaching. This supposedly is very, very ancient tradition. Supposedly coming, I want to read, because I don't have the PowerPoint, but I have the book. from the Yantra Yoga, the Tibetan Yoga of Movement, a stainless mirror of jewels, a commentary on Vairocana, the union of the sun and the moon yantra. So the title is Trulkor Nitakajor, the union of sun and moon. That strangely, if it is translated in Sanskrit, is Hatha Yoga in reality, no? And supposedly is a text that should be, according to what is the Rinpoche presentation in the introduction, probably can be traced to Odhyana, at least this kind of text related to this kind of practices was start to diffuse in the 4th century. And it's probably this kind of related to the Buddhist Anuttara Tantras or Arya Tantras. They start to in India around the beginning of the 4th century. And then from Odhyana, a keen to identify many scholars, the Swat Valley present in Pakistan, a Simo Yantra, entitled The Union of the Sun and Moon Yantra, was originally transmitted by Mahasiddha Hunkara to the great master Padmasambhava, who then transmitted it to Vairocana in the 8th century in Tibet. So we call it the Tibetan Yoga because we receive the teaching and the transmission through the Tibetan tradition. But if it has to be traced, you can see from Rinpoche's introduction how it could be the trace. Hunkara was in Nepal, for example, no? And Guru Rinpoche, we know, the people who know a little bit of the history of Buddhism in Tibet, they know the importance of Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava in the history. Now, Vairocana was very famous. Also, Vairocana was at the court of the king, and he had also his kind of different, many experiences in his time on earth. Certain point, he was also in Jaron, where I was a few years ago, and because Rinpoche wanted to go, as Alessandro said, we did nothing with our teachers, absolutely nothing. And we will be human beings, of course, but all the knowledge we have, the little knowledge I have, it comes really from Rinpoche's teaching and Rinpoche's presence, Rinpoche's transmission. And I will go to that in a moment. But just to something more of this kind, and so I was in Tibet, and Rinpoche was supposed to go and wanted to go to see the cave of Vairocana, special places, but he couldn't because then his physical condition didn't allow. So I happened to be there to teach, and so I had a few days, and so I went. I went to the cave that Rinpoche wanted to go, that not many people knew at the time, I discovered. But our driver, more or less, we arrived there, 3,000 meters and going straight from Chengdu, that is 500, so it was not really, but this place is absolutely, is in my heart, and everybody went there. Is a place that you don't want to go away, but you have to go, you can't stay. But you really don't want to go away. It's a place that is really fantastic. The famous sacred places, they have this kind of energy, they have this kind of condition, no? So that is Vairocana. What I was saying about Naljor, Nalma, can also be understood as a relaxed state, relaxed in the true sense of being relaxed. That is actually the purpose of all the yantras, or all the sulkor in reality, no? To coordinate our energy so we can be in a condition that is coordinated and relaxed and harmonized. And that is the base of body, energy, and mind to be able to practice. The thing that this method that Rinpoche explained and taught us is called Trulkor Nitakajor. There is no Tsalun. Because Tsalun, in reality, was another text that came in the trilogy of the text of Vairocana, One was the true core, the movement, the yantras. No, because yantra, true core, from the point of view of yantra is intended like a mechanism, something that is moving. Because yantra is movement. Yantra is all movement. Movement of the breath, movement of the body. And what is the aspect of Tsalun got lost. The pure practice of Tsalun was lost. Is the third text that got lost. And then another text was about the medical benefit, the aspect of for our health, from different point of view of the joints, of the organs, of the prana, because what Alejandro explained before, the 5 different lungs, they are subtle energy connected with breathing. You know? The prana now is a word that everybody knows. It's considered also an external energy like the cosmic energy or whatever it is, and then goes down to the idea that the prana is something that you take in, no? Also different interpretation of term pranayama or pranayama. But there is the effect that breath has in our aspect of the subtle energy. And here, Alejandro already taught about the chakras, the channels, all the, and the subtle function of the element, no? Connected to also the 5 lungs that are very powerful, because if breath is powerful, the subtle energy of the prana are very, 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 very important. But that is the point of Yantra Yoga, the system of Vairochana. Breathing is very important, is the base. In fact, from the very beginning, the first thing that is explained is how to breathe correctly, not just breathe, but there is precise indication. Sometimes it's called the fluid breathing, sometimes the smooth breathing, sometimes translated as the calm breathing, but it's the same characteristic. Should be starting from below, it means should be a diaphragmatic breathing. And here I cannot go explaining diaphragmatic, but normally, let's say, is understood. It means that it's starting from below, that the diaphragm can do its job properly, and then move upward. And then should go out reverse, starting to go out from the chest and finish again in the abdomen. And that is a little different from many of the yoga schools that are around in our dimension in this time, where sometimes the exhalation starts from below too. But this is very important, and then should be direct. It means that is not controlled, not blocked. So basically it should be as much smooth and natural as possible. That is extremely, extremely important, because that is the base of everything else. All the movement, they apply the smooth breathing, the fluid breathing, and should be a continuous movement, inhaling and exhaling. And then, as Alejandro did in the beginning, a moment of hold. In Yantra, we hold. Yantra is designed around the holdings in the Yantra Vairochana. It's designed around the holdings. But the holdings are the most powerful to influence the function of these 5 lungs. Are the holdings that are the most powerful tool. And there is 5 different holdings. And all the practice of Yantra Yoga Vairochana is designed around these holdings. First, there is the body training to prepare the limbs, to prepare the respiration, to prepare the channels, and then all the yantras deepen deeply this aspect of the holdings. Open hold after we inhale, then we direct down the air to go into close hold, and then after close hold there is the contracted hold, and then there is empty hold. But all of these, if you look from the point of view of the Tsalun, is like to prepare for the capacity of holding correctly what is called Kumbhaka. And here we go in another aspect that I mentioned before, because as we received this teaching, this practice of Salun, as the true understanding of Nalwa, goes with transmission. We need to receive introduction into the true state, our primordial state. And it's like, otherwise it's like having a computer and not having the plug. We are connected and the computer will never come alive. The light will never come alive by itself. So this is the aspect where, in reality, this kind of aspect of the practice of Yantra Yoga and other different separated, the practice of Salun, of which there were many examples in the painting that are in the temple of the Dalai Lama, and that Alejandro was showing before, the small temple de Lucan. Many of these methods without transmission, because in the West, we are very much lead to look for methods, you know, for we want something, some method of something, but the method without the life of the method doesn't necessarily work. This kind of practices, and I'm sure Alejandro agrees, especially the practice that are more related with the more internal energies, we cannot really teach, like, as Alejandro himself says in his introduction of his book, this book is explaining how to do and this and that, but at the end you have to learn directly from a teacher. The same thing says Vajrayana. This book is for having a base for the possibility of learning, but then you have to learn from your teacher physically, you know? So these days, for example, there is everything in YouTube, in internet. And I know already when I was studying in the university with Rinpoche, because I have a degree in Tibetology in reality, even if I don't know, doesn't look like, but I do have one. And there was a person who was coming and just got one of these books about things, and they tried to apply Kundalini Yoga, basically with Kumbhaka, the holding and things like that. And he ended up having mental problems. There are some point where it's said that people should be careful to practice practices like Kumbhaka without proper instructions and proper care, because they can send one of these energy of this prana. In some places, in some ways, they can create serious problems, also mental problems, and then are not so difficult to break and to go back to be a normal person. So trying to learn this thing from internet without having the proper introduction to the method and everything, I'm not sure is so advisable, for example, while all the aspect of purely the true core, the purpose of this is really, really, really to do what Alejandro was mentioning, to create balance and coordinate our conditions. And whatever then you want to do with that doesn't really matter. When you have your condition that is balanced, we can be a little more healthy, a little less stressed, or overcome some physical or emotional problems. That is fantastic. It's fantastic because it's something that everybody can manifest for him or herself. And we can also, when we are, if we ourselves can be able to be more stable, more in harmony, and why not more healthy, more happy, also people around us can be in the same way. The reverse of what I was saying before, no? We try to be happy, start from one, and we can maybe help other, no? In some ways. And then is the reason why, for example, we teach, I'm pretty sure. Because in this way, we can maybe help people to find a condition that allows to live better for ourselves and for others. And not only this, because when we talk about all this practice, We talk importance of prana, okay? Prana and mind. We talk about this very important and subtle aspect of the practice of yoga. Even in Hatha Yoga, in reality, the origin aspect, there were not all these many asana and things, no, in Hatha Yoga. Mostly was to prepare for meditation, but in reality, yantra is the same. Apart the fact that we can heal yourself from anything, but the basic aspect is trying the condition that is relaxed and stable so we can practice. Our mind is not the monkey that doesn't allow us to do anything, and we can be more centered and more relaxed, more in our relaxed nature. Okay, so this, I think, is a very important aspect of the practice of yoga. Different tradition, everybody can choose what is better for her or him or for us in general. Doesn't really matter so much. But one thing I would like to point out, like the central point are the lungs, you know, because we come to the world inhaling, and with the last exhalation, we go in an empty hold until the next life. Empty hold is good. It's very good. Now there are many systems that use empty hold a lot. You know, there is many systems that are famous now, and they use a lot of empty hold and the balance between carbon dioxide and oxygen and so and so and so. But that is a very long empty hold. No, very, 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 very long. But the lungs are the ones that even they are passive because the diaphragm is doing most of the job, but still they have to be there. Otherwise, there is nowhere where our ox can go. And I'm sorry if I want to say that, but I really feel in this moment that is needed also to raise this awareness. The trees are the lungs of the planet. Without them, the planet doesn't breathe. We do not breathe. And the oxygen that we breathe is not an oxygen for white people, yellow people, brown people, whatever colors, whatever gender, whatever thing we want to discriminate or indicate or whatever. We breathe the same air. It's not different for anyone. And the air that we breathe is come from these enormous lungs that are there, the body of the earth, the lungs of the earth. And then we can discuss about also the cosmic consciousness, or as was a little bit mentioning Alejandro about the things of science and consciousness. Now there is so many study on consciousness, and quantum physics is mixing with neuroscience, is mixing with social psychology, whatever you put it, no? Because somehow science is our religion, even if keeps changing. But in the moment we look at it, that's the truth. And then after sometimes changes, I say, oh no, it was not like this, it's like this. And now is the next truth. So the famous thing that everything is relative is kind of true. But in any case, it's also important because it's language of our times and is very helpful. So it's excellent, the work that Alejandro did. I had in my heart for a long time wanted to do this, but I didn't have the opportunity, the circumstances. But I think it's very important, and it is some of the things where we can really try to share knowledge and try to find work that can also basically at the end of the day not really help us as individuals or as disciples or as being inside a transmission or a tradition or a teaching, but for everyone. Because this aspect, and that's why Rinpoche wanted to make public, and there is a Yantra Yoga book that is little that I work on, and the more accessible part of Yantra Yoga for everybody. And the purpose was this: it can be of benefit, then it's just something that is good to do. And I wanted to do just correct one small thing now. because Rinpoche entrusted the Yantra Yoga not only to myself, but also to Laura Evangelisti. He entrusted us to be able to keep bringing forward the teaching of Yantra Yoga and be sure that there was not very much transformation that occurs, you know, inevitably when the things start to, so that was our task, and should try to be even now. And now one last simple word about Respira. Respira is simply try to help people understand and practice the fluid breathing. Is that? Because only that, in our daily life, if we could breathe in a way that is smooth, that is complete, that is efficient, is an enormous gift at all the level we can imagine of our existence. And this is influenced by the posture of our body, by the quality and the structure of our breathing, and by the presence of our mind, the perception of our body and how everything is interacting, because everything is interdependent. We know the plasticity of the brain, the importance of interoception, the importance of the fascia. We are integrated systems. It is body, voice, energy, and mind. Okay, I finished. Otherwise, I take too much time.
Thank you, Fabio, for
welcome
for your intervention, for your precious intervention. And before starting with this session of question and answer, let me address you a quite interesting article appeared in Frontiers of Psychology, which title is Introducing Social Breathing, a Model of Engaging in Relational Systems. To me, is quite interesting such a metaphor, because as the trees are our common lungs, the concept of social breathing, in my view, could be very useful to be adopted and adapted, because helping people to use properly and with awareness of how to breathe, and so how to behave, etc., we will have a different outcomes in social context. So to use and to read, I suggest you all to read such an article, because it's quite stimulating. And we need a social view for all these things. To be,
I had an experience.
Yeah, to be really, please.
Yeah, when I did a course, and in Yantra we had the rhythmic breathing, no? That as having heart rate variability, coherence, and everything, when you do it is well known. Now there is infinite of this kind of method going around, the box breathing, like they invented by somebody, but they are in the traditional yoga since millennia, and all these kind of things, no? 4, 7, 8, this kind of thing to go to sleep, but they are, well, anyway, doesn't matter. But, and I put people who practice rhythmic breathing back by back. First 2, and then 4. After a little while, the rhythm of the breath and the heart goes together. And you have to see these people. There is a kind of pleasure, a kind of joy, you know, is very interesting. I even designed the chair, probably Paolo knows,
yeah,
to help people doing this, and then didn't get in fruition, but absolutely, because it's connected with the heart, no? In reality, aspiration is connected with the heart in a very deep way. It's sitting there, the heart, and this influenced by the diaphragm. Everything is the posture is influenced. this social aspect is something that, especially what we are witnessing and experiencing now, is something that is important because we breathe the same air.
Yeah, this is the reason why I suggested, and Alejandro immediately posted the link, and I immediately uploaded the article physically in the chat, because if you can adopt the common language, we will be more useful, for more benefit for our patients, because, for example, as I mentioned before, we, at least in Italy, I have experience of the, obviously, of the national Italian health system. We have a big problem, big issue with post-hospitalized people, because even if in the hospital, Italian hospital, of a high quality, they have appropriate treatments, often having been missed. They do not receive proper rehabilitation along with. So the problem of breathing rehabilitation is in Italy, we have at least 50,000 people readmitted from hospitalization. So you have an idea of this. I mean, the recovery from intensity department. So please, from the audience, Aimavati will help us to take care of the questions from the audience. Please, se c'è qualcuno che vuole intervenire, Aimavati ci aiuta a tenere nota degli interventi. So please, you can address some questions to our distinguished guest. So raise your hand and make your question. Silence.
Madi has any question? They are speechless. Questionless.
Questionless.
You know, Yongzhen Rinpoche used to say, if there are no questions, it's either one of two reasons. Everything is very clear, or they don't have any clue where to start off.
Yes, Rinpoche sometimes was saying, sometimes when people don't understand, they say, oh, very interesting.
So if there are no questions, let me go back to a couple of things that Fabio.
Yes, please.
That I think it's really important, because as Fabio was saying, and different texts talk about things a little different. But this aspect that there are practices that sometimes we just call Tsalung, sometimes we just call Trunkor, sometimes Tsalung Trunkor. And what's interesting is most of the practices, at least from what I've seen, when they're just Tsalung, they are from the tantric perspective. So for example, the ones that we look at, as I was mentioning, in the book by Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, Awakening the Sacred Body, this is this idea, like Namkha Nobu Rinpoche would say, Tantra is about union, right? Whereas in the Trunkor texts, are in the Dzogchen texts, such as in the Atri Dzogchen, the Shangshu Ninju Dzogchen. And what's interesting, it's about self-transformation. In a way, you're holding, you're inhaling, holding your breath, doing a movement, and then shaking, steering from the depth of samsara, exhaling. Sometimes in our practices, we use sounds, ha, pet. And then you just stay. And so in a way, each of those movements is an opportunity of either getting it or not, right? And so what happens, there is no need of union in those movements. You're coming from a state of probably confusion. You have an opportunity to bring your breath from the side channels into the central channel. And then you have the intention of doing this for the benefit of all beings. You do whatever movement you're, any of the 40 of the of the Atri or 39 of the Shengshung Ninjo, or from the 108 of the Nida Kajor, and then you shake. And when you're shaking, it says you're steering from the death of samsara. So it means that you're not just doing it for your own benefit, you're doing it for the benefit of all beings. And when you exhale, ha is a sense of exhalation, ha. And then pe is a syllable of cutting, not just cutting the breath, but cutting the engagement of the mind. So for a moment, you're in this kind of head-away. And if you're able to stay that neljor, that's when you actually can get it. Otherwise, if you're in this kind of wanting to, okay, hape, what's the next one? You totally missed the benefit. And that's why it's from the Dzogchen perspective, it's this, in that moment, it's an opportunity to get it. I sometimes call it, it's almost like, in the Zen, they throw you a shoe, kind of the slap, right? So in that moment, you have that opportunity of getting it. And if you didn't, you do another one, and then hopefully after a few, you get it. And if you get it, you just rest, right? And stay. So hopefully that is helpful.
Thank you, Alejandro.
Well,
now
the
there
way
is...
the Rinpoche taught us was not advisable to use this method freely, like casually. That is what the teaching that I received and the teaching that I follow. I understand the principle, but then we would have to distinguish from something that Hedewa is something else. And then we go into teaching Dzogchen, and we are not entering into teaching Dzogchen because, first of all, we would need to being able to give transmission because it's linked with transmission. And since we have not this, I have not, for example, and I don't know, somebody might have this capacity. And then that would be still a kind of mechanic of the brain, but doesn't lead you really to the being able to be in your real nature. Because for that, as I understood the teaching of Rinpoche, we need transmission, direct introduction by a teacher with that capacity and that knowledge.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a very important point. And I think both, our teachers, Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, Lopon Tenzin Namda, they've been, in a way, struggling with this, right? On one hand, they have these amazing tools that they could benefit. And then there's other ways of, well, but we can't really do this or that. And so they've been, I think, from my perspective, they've been meandering and trying to see what's the best way and when. All of these teachers have been pioneers, and also because of that, been actually, getting, how do you call it, backlash from others in the community. When Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche started teaching Trungkor more openly, and even Dzogchen practices more openly, there was a backlash in the Tibetan community. Same with Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. Same, but it's part of, being that pioneer. How do you thread, in this world? And I think this is really important what Fabio is saying. And so partly of how do we bring this? And so, for example, someone is asking from Tashigar, how can we do this with cancer patients, right? And so, most of these cancer patients are totally neophytes to any yoga, to any meditation. But I have to say, when I started at MD Anderson, Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche was right in Houston. And he had just been diagnosed with his own cancer. And I told him about this possibility. And I asked him, what would you do? And he said, just teaching them to be calm, that's not enough. They're at this time that, they might be, depending on their stage, they might be on their way of leaving the body. So give them tools to at least try and get to that real condition. You know, even if they're saying 3 times, even if, you know, what are tools? And so there is this balance of trying to do our best to the best of our capacities of how do we teach? How do we create this protocol for people with cancer, for example, where we can incorporate both? It's almost like a big, you know, big learning, you know, curve, because we're asking them going from not knowing anything about meditation or breathing, and, you know, in maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks, teaching them a lot of material. And some of them may have the capacity for it, some may have some. And this is part, I totally agree with Fabio. And at the same time, trying to give them tools, both to relieve their pain, anxiety, so it might be physical pain, psychological pain, mental pain, social pain, as well as hopefully maybe reconnect them to their aspect of spirituality. It doesn't have to be Dzogchen. It could be back to their own prayers in Christianity or whatever it is. So I think that it's a balance act.
Alejandro, this is pure salutogenetic approach, in my view.
Mhm.
No, because no matter what is Christian, whatever, as you said, no. But the problem is how to approach and how to get from inside to outside some outcomes, positive outcomes for the patients, no? In
Yes.
order to take experience and to try to recover from the condition of before. Do you agree?
Totally. And, you know, we don't have to think of just, I mean, it's not about cure necessarily, it's about healing. And healing could be at different levels. And if, you know, we just had a Sangha member with cancer who in Mexico who had just recently passed away. And just being with her and the community being with her, allowing her to pass, to reconnect to the teachings and pass in a good way. That's what we can do too. That's part of the practice. It's not about necessarily staying in this, as Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche says, this is a Airbnb. You know, at some point, we need to let it go.
Thank you. So, Julia, sorry.
What you are saying, for example, breathing is a tool that if they say, if they can say, they can breathe. So it means you can use breathing or you can use sound. What I think that in the context, if there are certain things that are connected to something that is of a special nature according to the teacher that transmitted to us, then should we respect this? But doesn't matter, because the world is full of sound, is full of way of breathing, and these kind of things are absolutely open to anything and to whatever. That's one of the reasons that, for example, I started to teach these things of Respira, because the breathing is with everybody, in every place, in every age, in every condition, and is a powerful tool. We know also from brain plasticity, a powerful tool also to modify the brain, because changes also the condition of the mind, and so changes also the aspect of consciousness and many things. And so this one is just there. Everybody has it. There don't have to be an affiliation or anything. And as you say, I totally agree. The moment they might have some kind of interest in a spiritual path, doesn't really matter where they go.
Right.
If they find their own, whatever it is, that is the gift.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, and I asked both Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, His Holiness Lumto Tempanima, Yongzin Tenzin, what should I teach for this people? And so I don't, you know, I always go back to my teachers and see what is appropriate to teach. How do we create something that make sense. And so for me, that has been both one of the responsibilities as well as, in a way, a wonderful honor to be able to work with my teachers in this way as we bring these both in the research and the clinic into these practices. So I totally agree. I did want to say, someone, Bodhi, was asking me a little bit, or asking about the, how do we work in this different lineages? And I want to say something about that, for example, in a couple of different texts. So let's go back to just Trungkor. So for example, in the Arti Trungkor, what we work with is that we really, the Arti Trungkor really emphasizes this 5 kind of lung. The upward moving lung, the pervasive lung, the life force lung, the fire-like lung, the downward moving lung, and there's movements that relate to each of these 5. And it's very, in a way, they go very hand in hand to the Maju Tsa lung. Now, in the Shangshu Ninju Trungkor, it's really interesting because what they do, and a little bit like what Fabio was saying, the different kinds of holding in here, they usually emphasize 3 main kinds of holding, what they call Jamlung, Barlung, and Draklung, or soft holding, medium holding, and wrathful holding, that usually they're like a basket, a vase, and sometimes they call it a mass of fire. I call it pressure cooker, and so partly it is how to promote particularly the pervasive lung, what they call the kyaplung or chaplung. And so the movements are done in this pervasive breath, which allows you not only to bring that breath and all the, to clear like the wind throughout your channels and your eventually through all your pores, but also that as you cultivate these qualities, these positive qualities, that you can also bring them to others in the sense of your intention of bring those to others as you do the practice. So there's 2 main terms that I think are important, and I don't know, Fabio, if these are also in the Nida Kajor Trunkor. I imagine they may be. And one is called Geksel, and the other one is called Bogdun. So Geksel is Gek, it's like as it sounds in English. Gek is like stuff, obstacle. So Geksel, Selwa is to clear. So Geksel is clearing away the obstacles. And then Bogdun is enhance your meditation. So as you clear your stuff, then you're able to rest and enhance that meditative state of mind. If we think of back to the it's like they could be a dull or a clear So, hopefully we'll get slowly and slowly to a more clear like if we have a bottle that it's dirty and you keep on, using water inside and shoving it out, and again, eventually it gets more clear.
Thank you, Alejandro. There is Julia had question. I have heard it is said that the Indian Hatha system is fire-based, meaning the practices often are designed to generate heat, tapas, and they purify the body the way. And the Chinese practices like Tai Chi are water-based. Would you say that Tibetan yoga true core is focused on balancing, fostering all the elements equally? Please, both of you, give me an answer.
No, Alejandro, please.
So from my perspective, as I said, we are, since it's working with all 5 elements, it is on one hand, I guess if you think of a conventional way, it would be to balance the 5 elements. But really, if you think of absolute, is really being in the space element, where the elements are balanced by themselves by that, right? So you're going, but as the path, yes, you start you know, by balancing the elements like medicine does as well. Tibetan medicine does as well. So I would say there's a balancing of the elements, and eventually is being able to rest in that space quality where all the elements are there. So if I go back to the as the example as crystal, now with that awareness, there's rainbow, right? Because all the lights, all the elements are manifesting from it. So, Fabio?
Well, in the WHO channel, when the first thing we do is the exhalation of 9 exhalation, then impure prana. And when we do that, this is, it should take an explanation that is long, but I can't. But for example, here there is visualization that we inhale all the 5 colors representing the essence of the elements, and we strengthen our energy, and then exhale like impure, and this is connected with the, of course, the presence of the mind and the intention, because intention is something very important. Intention is extremely important. The way you apply intention, the intention of working and trying to live and to try to foster the benefit for others is extremely important in Buddhism. No? That is the essence of Mahayana. But regarding the elements and this kind of aspect, in the absence of appendix of yantra, there is also this specific aspect. But in general, every movement is working one or more of these 5 pranas to balance and coordinate. Sometimes they get stuck, sometimes they get too weak, sometimes they are somewhere they're not supposed to be, and all these movements, they work in that sense. For example, also connected to the aspect of the Buddhist teaching, the Shengshung for finding calm, purifying the prana, to do this, the 5 series of elements, the camel to eliminate obstacles, disturbed condition of the earth element, the conch, the flame, the turtle, the plow, no, water element, earth element, fire element, air element, space element. They are all the yantras connected also to the aspect of the element. But what is more defined in the aspect of the benefit is the working on 3 aspects: the aspect of the physical body, the tendons, the joint, and so on; the aspect of the organs, according also in Tibetan medicine, the empty organs and full organs, and this kind of aspect; and then the aspect of the subtle energy of the prana, the 5 lungs. One or more of that are coordinated. A single movement is working at the different level, at this level. This is the aspect of the movement of yantra, from the 8th movement to all the yantras. So this aspect is there. What is not there, for example, that it is in the Kumar Kumari. In the Kumar Kumari, there is the aspect of the sound. The Kumar Kumari is this system that Rinpoche, also based in ancient tantras, developed about yantra yoga for children, where the breath is also connected to all specific different sounds. There, the purpose is also to use the sound to structure the breathing in a certain way, because one sound allows you for a longer exhalation, another sound for a sharper exhalation, because there is different ways of breathing. There is direct and short, direct and long, controlled and short, controlled and long, the 4 different aspects of the breath. Wrathful, as was mentioning Alejandro, the wrathful, but it's all about the breathing. When we go to the saloon, and in yantra there are saloon, there are the first breathing is to prepare the structure to be able to hold correctly. The second breathing, the rhythmic breathing, is to expand the capacity of the holding in the proper way. The third breathing start to use the channels and so on, and central channel and so on. The 4th, the pranayama, all the different chakras, with all the elements, all the pranayama to integrate one by one into the nature of the elements. And the last prana, last pranayama is more, is kind of wrathful, and they also work on the empty hold that is connected with all the aspect of sensation of the body. So there is a lot, a lot to consider, and eventually being able to apply. But it's not so easy. All the variations of yantra, most of them, some are quite difficult. So the basic yantras are more, certainly people who are sick with how Alejandro was explaining, they probably would be able to do only simple things. Because otherwise, anche Dr. Punzowamo, for example, no? She had experiences using, for example, the first exercises of yantra, the Shengshung, mobilize the body, everything circulating, you know, having something really moving, and starting from, even in Hatha Yoga, there are these, no? There are these Pavamuttasana exercises that start from doing this, you know? Because when you are in certain condition, everything that is moving something, unless there is some contraindication, is good, no? Is important. But the focus of yantra is the breath. Yeah, definitely. No. Yantra is designed around the breath, around the holding of the breath.
Yeah, and same with the Trunkor, and but as I said, but at the end is to be able to stay in that state of mind. John,
yes, because the prana and the mind. But
right.
Even in studying neuroscience now are saying that breath is like the remote control of the brain, and the brain might not be the mind. If we have no brain, there is the lead. Even at least we should have half. And then the half learn how to work for the whole brain, no? But if there is totally no brain, then we have a little problem. Sometimes looks that humanity has lost it, but it's still there to doing other things.
Yeah, it seems that lost most of the brain. Let me respond to John Renshaw that was asking about the translation of the Trunkor text. And yes, I think that there are different translations, and that's why even though in the Tibetan Yoga for Health and Well-being, I didn't publish the translation. In the last one, I did. So again, it's uniform and reliable. You know, that's what translations. And you're right that there's some of the texts are very pith. And so what I tried to do in that one, particularly for people like you that are interested in this, is at the end, it's the translation itself. And at the beginning is how I use that translation in my practice and my teaching. So hopefully that helps, and we can do that with others too. And you know, you're welcome to email me if you know, you want to talk more about that. And I'm putting my, okay. There we go.
I just received directly a question, say if both of you will please post in the chat your address, and in order to be contacted for information about the different courses or whatever. So Fabio for Yantra Yoga and Alejandro for Trunkor. So please, in order to give the attendees some reference of yours.
One little thing I want to say, because before there was a reference to Hatha Yoga. Well, Hatha Yoga, what is Hatha Yoga? It's very interesting because we don't really know, honestly. Because what is considered Hatha Yoga now doesn't have very much to do with what Hatha Yoga in the 12th, 14th, and 15th century. Actually, there are some study now that would trace the origin of Hatha Yoga in a Buddhist text called the Amrita Siddhi, that was much earlier. And then there is all this the commission of Hatha Yoga coming from the Buddhist tradition, but we being a link and transforming to the Vedanta tradition that was the basis of this or that. There are so many studies also about Patanjali, Patanjali was a syncretist. There was a two Patanjali, one a grammatician, one another, and there is so many. So it's very complex to try really define what is Hatha Yoga, honestly, because the original text there were almost no asanas. It was mostly purification practices and kriyas and things and so and so and so. So, and also this question about finding a coordination between different kind of eventual system of true core. But as I said before, we tend to look for a method, but most of these methods were connected to a transmission, to a lineage, you know? And so, and some of these methods also are related to termas. And then they have their own heart in that. And so they are different, but they're different because they have this kind of life that is in this way. So there is no reason to melt it together because they all have their value in the dimension they are. And we get in touch to one method or another method according to our karma, our proclivity and whatever it is. And then if we find value, then we decide and just apply. I remember my Hatha Yoga teacher in India, what was saying, be careful not to become master of nothing and crazy for everything.
To me, they told me something similar, which was, you know, you start digging in many holes, but once you find the water, keep on digging just in that one.
Yeah, the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Other questions from the audience?
I know some people wanted to, you know, for us to share some, you know, a movement or so. I don't know if there's the time of this is the right forum. Maybe we could do one each or something, or I don't know if otherwise we'll do it at another more of a workshop.
But we can plan if Fabio agrees to schedule another workshops, as you are saying, Alejandro, in order to do a sort of comparative workshop. As you know, we are usually is a normal procedure in the field of research, as you know. So if you agree, we can schedule with very pleasure, or at least if you want, both of you, if you want, you are most welcome to show something. Please, you have to decide, you both. Cosa dici, Fabio?
Pensa, we intend the word comparative.
I mean,
sharing.
I mean,
sharing a little of our knowledge with people. I agree to that.
Yeah, I mean, if we want of you agree to organize to have more time, another event in order to do as someone has requested, some true core or yantras, etc., or showing as briefly just now as someone has requested. Up to you.
Is to do something that can be useful for people or only to see, because they're two different things.
Yes, I know, but there is
only to teach the 9 breathings. I need 1 hour.
I know. So Alejandro, is perhaps is better that we can schedule another event in order to have more time to do.
So yeah, and just to let you know, for those who are interested also in, you know, I agree with Fabio. There are things that you need more time to teach. Sometimes even, you know, even just what I did at the beginning of being able to hold, you know, for example, in the heart chakra and then re-inhale, already you're stretching the heart that, as Sharon Salzberg says, it's a generous muscle. And just expand, and sometimes even just add, you know, and exhale. Sometimes there's adding of particular movements that expand on that. And the same with the different chakras that connect to the different 5 kinds of breath and the 5 elements. But also, if you wanted to know some of the relation, as also Paul is saying, last weekend I taught with Punzo Wamo, with Menpa Punzo Wamo, a course on the 5 elements in Tibetan medicine and in Tibetan yoga from the traditions that I learned. And so we have that course available as well. And I mentioned others there. So maybe we'll leave it as that today, and maybe with that maybe in the future we'll do something more.
Yeah, please,
I
Fabio.
could show something very simple, but not of yantra, because in yantra I can show something, but I could show something or respira, that a very simple exercise, but would not really be the theme of this meeting. And I could show, for example, the rhythmic breathing. The rhythmic breathing I can show just quickly. And this rhythmic breathing is something that you practice really to coordinate and relax. I remember we were working with Enrico organization when the Dalai Lama came to Italy, to America, to inauguration of the Shengshung Institute there. And we were totally stressed. And when I told Rinpoche, what? We are totally stressed. Rinpoche said, you know, Yantra Yoga, practice the rhythmic breathing. So it's proven that this kind of breathings can help people relax. So it's very simple. And it's a 4-4-4. You have to inhale from below up, exhale tiny, fluidly. But then you inhale for 4 counts, moving in this way. Then you hold, but hold open in the sense that you hold but relaxed. In the mean, you don't try to do anything with your air inside. You just leave it there peacefully, totally relaxed, without wanting to do anything. Would be probably the first, or the way of holding that Alejandro was mentioning before, the jump, the smooth. No, you leave it inside. We call it open hold, Ganwa. Inhale from the nostril. This is another important thing. It's super important we breathe from the nostrils, even in normal life, even at night. We are designed to breathe from the nostrils, not really from the mouth. That is something that we have to be mindful of. Inhale for 4 counts, a little slower than a second in a relaxed way. Then you hold, extend the pause after inhalation in your body for 4 counts. Then exhale a little quicker in 2. And then remain empty for 2 counts. And then start again. Okay, then this progresses and goes on and on and on and on. This is the rhythmic breathing.
Alejandro. Let me add then just something simple that what I was adding before. And so if we, for example, there's one movement that it's related to the Tsalung, but it's a movement that might be useful for people. So that as we are holding into the heart and re-inhaling, we feel that sense of expansion of the breath, and we extend the right arm, and we do like a lasso movement. We're not exhaling yet, we're holding 3 times with the right, 3 with the left. And then still holding, opening
Is blocked.
the right side of the chest, and then the left, and then exhale. And when you exhale, you feel not only that you're exhaling through the nose, because as Fabio said, we are inhaling and exhaling through the nose, but also as we exhale, we feel like at the heart, and not just forward, to all directions. So we could do it together. Eventually we do it 5 times, but many times for people who are not comfortable holding, I usually start with 3 and then 4 and then 5. So we could do it 1 time today because I know we're running out of time, but at least it gives you some experience. So I'll do it 5. You could do it 3, 4, 5, whatever is comfortable. And with that, we can close. So inhale and hold. Re-inhale. As we keep on breathing, just resting in our heart. And if we can open our eyes kindly, we can just stay in the space in front of us. And if that is it's not comfortable, just close them. Then just have a sense that whatever gathered with the, when we do this, actually, we're bringing the power of the 5 elements in our space, in our heart. Now we share it from our heart to everyone's heart. And so we can share it to everyone here, everyone in the Zoom, everyone in the webinar, everyone in all our communities, and particularly back to people in Ukraine, and with the intention that we use more the heart and less the brain, I guess, and the good intentions. As the Dalai Lama says, a good heart is the best religion.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. Thank you very much, Fabio. We are just in time. So it has been a great, let me repeat heartily, a great opportunity to organize such an important workshop. I am looking forward to having your support organizing a future occasion. And in due time, we upload the recordings on our different channels, and see you soon in the future. And Tashitele.